Hi, and welcome to the NAIA Weekly Football Report. I'm your host, Alan Grossbach, alongside Chad Waller, coming to you from the NAIA headquarters in downtown Kansas City. This is the first installment of the weekly show where we will highlight the 58th year of NAIA football, showcase the student-athletes, teams, and institutions that participate. Each week, we'll take a look back at last week's games, go behind the scenes of the top 25, look into the games for the upcoming week, highlight milestones, and showcase those feature stories from around the NAIA. Before we get into 2013, let's take a look back at the 2012 National Championship between Marion and Morningside. Both teams are playing in their first ever championship title game, as Marion entered the game as the number 5 ranked team and Morningside at number 3. Marion, who was playing in just its 6th year of varsity football, won its first ever championship title in overtime, 30-27. An interesting side note about the lower-ranked team in the title game, that win for Marion marked the 6th time in the last 7 years that the lower-ranked team was victorious in the title game. You know, it just shows that there's the parity and that the upsets are happening in NAIA football.
Definitely, and we got to highlight one guy that was a game changer, and that was Marion's Mike Józefowski, who connected on 3 field goals, including the game-tying one to send it into overtime, and then the game winner from 26 yards out. Going past the numbers, Józefowski, he nailed a 51-yarder 2 weeks previous in that semifinal win against Missouri Valley to propel the Knights to the championship game. Talk about performing under pressure. The Knights outscored Morningside as a team 20-7 over the final 15 minutes and overtime period en route to the victory. The amazing part is that this was the first overtime game recorded in the 57 years of the title game. To see Marion win the whole thing in such a short time that you mentioned earlier, that's just 6 years as a varsity program, is truly an accomplishment. Now we look ahead to the 2013 title game being played in Rome, Georgia for the sixth straight year and the final time.
Yeah, it's exciting. That game on December 21st will definitely be a good one. You know, as we transition into 2013, one thing that's exciting around college football is the addition of new programs, and the NAIA is no different. We've got 3 new varsity football programs this year in Oklahoma Baptist University, Warner University out of Florida, and Reinhardt University in Georgia. Oklahoma Baptist University did have football in 1940 or up until 1940, but then disbanded their program after that until they came online here again in 2013. The Bison are winless through 3 games, but it's not because they haven't been competitive with their opponents. Their average margin of defeat is less than a touchdown at 6.3 points per game. So they're in games. They're just either not sealing the deal or something's going wrong throughout. Similar to Oklahoma Baptist, Warner is searching for that first program victory. They've had a tough road through their first 3 games and haven't actually scored a touchdown yet. So they're looking to get on the board and get that first win. Conversely, Reinhardt picked up their first win of the season last Saturday over, at the time, a receiving votes Kentucky Christian team, 19-14, to improve to 1-2 on the year.
So it was a win against a team that wasn't too shabby.
Exactly.
Now let's take a look back at the top games so far this season. And as we sit here on September 17th, there have been 3 weeks of games played already in the NAIA football world. Number 4, St. Xavier defeated number 2, Marion, 31-24 during week 2. And it was one of the most anticipated matchups of the 13 season because it matched up the 2 previous national champion winners, number 2 Marion and number 4 St. Xavier, and that game was played in week 2 this year. Previously, these 2 teams would have met as members of the Mid-States Football Association Mid-East. However, St. Xavier moved to the Midwest League in 2013 while Marion stayed in the Mid-East League. Now, St. Xavier rallied with 21 unanswered points to take the 31-24 overtime victory. Sean Jones' 13-yard touchdown catch was the difference maker in overtime. Now, the Cougars' defense was a highlight of the game as they forced and recovered a fumble in overtime when Marion was attempting to tie. So that preserved the victory for St. Xavier. In many conferences, one loss in the early going is not going to break your season, but that's not the case in the league that these 2 teams play in, the Mid-States Football Association. With now 2 losses after 3 weeks, Marion has to knock off 3 other teams that are either in the top 25 or receiving votes. So a very tall task to do. And highlight on your schedule, in the final regular season contest of the season, they will face St. Francis. Now St. Xavier, after a week 3 loss, has as tough of a road as Marion to the postseason. The Cougars are in the Midwest Division with 3 other top 25 teams, 2 of which are still undefeated.
I think you're talking about the Mid-States Association. Last year, I think it was the Mid-East Division that had 3 teams tied for first place. So they actually split the championship amongst those 3 teams. And now we're talking about historic or storied conferences around the NAI. So let's jump into what we had as the crossover showcase between the KCAC and the Heart of America Athletic Conference this last weekend, where all 10 teams of the league participated in this series, where number 1 faced number 1, number 2 faced number 2, and so on and so forth. The two 10-team leagues split the series 5-5, but there were 3 kind of key upsets that occurred over the weekend. Kansas Wesleyan, then unranked, defeated number 22 Evangel 38-28. Number 17 Tabor defeated number 10 Mid-American Nazarene 21-13, and number 18 Ottawa defeated number 2 Missouri Valley 20-6. There were some really interesting differences in that Ottawa-Missouri Valley game, as Ottawa's offense only tallied 153 total yards, while Missouri Valley went over 400. The big difference in the game, though, was the Braves' defense. They forced 4 turnovers and held the Vikings to 1-7 on 4th down.
Let's take a look at the NAI Game of the Week this past Saturday between number 20 Doane and number 13 Northwestern, in which Doane defeated Northwestern 34-27. The game was tied 27 midway through the 4th quarter after a Northwestern touchdown. However, Doane came back and responded with a 10-play, 84-yard march to regain the lead and win 34-27. Both teams now stand 1-1 on the season and look up at 3 undefeated teams in the Great Plains Athletic Conference standings.
Chad, our focus so far has been on the quality of NAI football this season. This kind of plays right into that, as 2 teams really flexed their muscles in Week 1, defeating NCAA Division I FCS schools when Grandview knocked off crosstown rival Drake 21-16, and Pikeville took down Morehead State 13-10. Pikeville, who, again, we'll talk about later in the top 25, is 3-0 on the young season. And actually, well, I'll preview a little bit, jumped in the top 25 for the first time since 2005, which is pretty impressive.
And it was a good win against another quality opponent. Moving to a milestone in the coaching ranks, Coach Steve Ryan of Morningside notched his 100th career win this past Saturday. His number 1 ranked Mustangs knocked off GPAC rival Nebraska Wesleyan 48-10. Coach Ryan is in his 12th season, and he stands 131 overall, and now is just 18 wins away from tying the school record of Jason Sanderson, who coached for a long, long time. And Coach Ryan should be applauded for his efforts in just 12 years. He's already at the 100-win club.
Now let's transition into the current top 25. We've been running on the preseason poll for the last few weeks, and now we finally got a first edition of the regular season for the coaches poll. And as you can imagine, there was a lot of shifting that occurred. So we'll start with teams ranked 16 to 25. Just within that grouping, there were 6 newcomers, which include number 25 Pikeville, 24 Lindsey Wilson, 23 Faulkner, 22 Robert Morris, 19 Rocky Mountain, and 17 St. Francis out of Illinois. Pikeville, who we mentioned earlier, who I obviously spoiled it already, is ranked for the first time since 2005, which is, I think, a string of like 91 straight polls for them. And talking about the other newcomers that were in that group, they were all actually mentioned in last year's 25, so they've been up there for a while. A big surprise was Marion, preseason ranked number 2, dropped to number 16 after a 1-2 start, like we mentioned before.
Now let's take a look at the grouping with ranked teams from 6 to 15 and some of those highlights. Number 8 Baker moved up 7 positions, and they reached the top 10 for the first time, dating back to 1999, so quite a while. Number 9 Grandview and number 14 Benedictine both push up a poll best 10 spots, largely because of 6 dropouts in the poll, but also because of their early undefeated success. Conversely, Missouri Valley fell 9 spots to number 11 after losing to number 18 Ottawa last Saturday by 2 touchdowns.
Now let's shift to the top 5. That's always a fun group to talk about. Obviously, we'll start with number 5 St. Xavier. The coaches didn't penalize the Cougars much for their loss last Saturday at Division II and 14th ranked University of Indianapolis. They dropped that game 51-20. The game was in Indianapolis. The Cougars kind of struggled on offense with 5 turnovers, but look to rebound this next week against a newly ranked number 22 Robert Morris, which will be a tough game.
And I don't think it's any surprise that number 4, Carroll, who was number 12 in the preseason, vaults up those 8 spots. Carroll has been a perennial contender for the national title every year, 6-time national champion. They're 3-0 right out of the gates this season. They came away with a 21-7 homecoming victory over preseason number 7 Montana Tech this past Saturday. And that was a bittersweet win for Carroll as they avenged the loss last year when Montana Tech halted Carroll's 13-year consecutive Frontier Conference reign.
One of the teams that I'm really excited about for this football season is number 3, Cumberland's University at Kentucky. The Patriots currently lead the NAI in total rushing offense. They've compiled more than 1,000 yards in their first 3 games, all victories, of course. Those wins came against preseason number 21 Belhaven, preseason number 25 Cumberland out of Tennessee, and unranked at the time Union, Kentucky. Cumberland's, they've just been dominating these opponents. They've defeated their opponents by an average of 28.6 points, so almost 30 points per game. And, another exciting piece for them, this is the first time they've been ranked in the top 5 again since 2005.
And they've earned it with those 2 big top 25 wins. Now looking at number 2 spot is St. Francis out of Indiana. The Cougars, who were ranked number 5 in the preseason poll after finishing as a national semifinalist in 2012, are 1-0 this year. That one victory came against the big one, though, and it was number 16 William Penn, 31-13. Talk about a streak in the poll. The Cougars have the longest consecutive active streak of being ranked in the top 25, dating back to 1999. That's a streak of 170 straight polls.
Wow, that is definitely an impressive streak. And of course, last but definitely not least, are the 2-0 Morningside Mustangs out of Sioux City, Iowa. They sit atop the poll for the second straight week, second time in program history. The defending runners-up have victories over Valley City State and Nebraska Wesleyan this season, who at the time were both receiving votes in the preseason poll. The Mustangs tallied 314 points in all 14 first-place votes this season en route to the number 1 ranking. The Mustangs head to 1-1 Dordt on Saturday for a tough GPAC conference battle.
And talking about this upcoming Saturday, we're going to now turn our attention to what's going down this weekend in the top 25. And there's a lot of key matchups for the top 25. And one that we can probably throw out there as a strong contender for NAI Game of the Week is number 7, St. Ambrose, at number 2, St. Francis of Indiana. Both teams are 1-0. St. Francis is coming off a 48-37 win over Taylor. In that victory, quarterback Eric Williamson tossed for 375 yards and 2 scores in the winning effort. Meanwhile, the Cougars will be playing their second straight top 25 team as they've already taken down number 16, William Penn. The St. Francis defense locked down the William Penn rushing attack last week, limiting them to under 200 yards. And remember, this is the same William Penn rushing team that has been notoriously ranked in the top 3 as a team for rushing yards.
Another key game this week is out in the Frontier Conference out west. This time it pairs 2 3-0 clubs when number 4 Carroll goes to number 19 Rocky Mountain. We talked about Carroll and their big upset victory over number 7 Montana Tech, but Rocky Mountain has not been a slouch this season. Their passing game is one of the best in the country, led by quarterback Bryce Baker. He's 3rd in the nation with over 340 yards passing per game this season for the Badland Bears, who are averaging 41 points per game in their 3 wins. Rockies played well at home and last year averaged 33 points per game in 5 home contests. The winner of this game has a big leg up in the Frontier Conference race, which is always a tight race, as you know.
Yes, it is. And besides those 2 games, we got to mention a couple other top 25 matchups, and there are quite a few of them. And it starts with number 8 Baker at number 14 Benedictine in the Heart of America Athletic Conference, number 9 Grandview at number 16 Marion, number 15 Mid-America Nazarene at number 11 Missouri Valley, and number 22 Robert Morris at number 5 St. Xavier. Out of this bunch, I'm most excited about the 2-0 Benedictine Ravens hosting 2-0 Baker. Those 2 teams normally are in the top 4 of the standings in the Heart of America Athletic Conference, and now that both Missouri Valley and Mid-America Nazarene last week lost, this league is wide open.
You're right, and you can never count out Mid-America Nazarene and Missouri Valley in that conference. Always 2 strong programs. Well, that puts a wrap on the first edition of the NAI Weekly Football Report. We hope you enjoyed the show. We'll be back next week with another exciting round of NAI football. And remember, this show is about you, the NAI, so we encourage your story ideas to be submitted to us so we can include them on our weekly recap. See the credits at the end of the show for information on how to submit those. Thank you for watching. Until next time, good night.